My name is Aadit Patel. I am the SVP of AI Product and Engineering at NotCo.
Adi, we had you last year at the first ever Food AI Summit, and you were talking about Giuseppe, et cetera. And I've been following you guys for a couple of years. You were the first company, consumer packaged goods company I saw talking about AI in product development. Why was that such a featured part of your branding and go to market?
It actually started from the very beginning. The
Yeah.
the idea and the company was built out of the idea that you could put AI first and build an AI first CPG company. And I would say across the last 7 years of the company's existence, we've been testing that out and pushing it to its limit every single day.
And you have a name for your AI. It's Giuseppe. And tell us about Giuseppe.
Yeah, so it's called Giuseppe. Giuseppe is named after a Renaissance painter, Giuseppe Arcimboldo, that made portraits out of fruits and vegetables. So the company, Not Company, started as a plant-based food CPG company. We used Giuseppe in the early days to figure out here are new different plant materials that you could actually use in a plant-based product to help it with its taste, texture, functionality, some aspect of the product that consumers would thrive to. And so in the beginning, Giuseppe was really about identifying novel plant-based materials. So in Not Milk, for example, we have pineapple and cabbage that Giuseppe helped figure out. In our plant-based chicken, I believe we have peach and tomato, which you would have never thought that these things have some sort of volatile overlap with chicken. But the system was able to kind of put forth these sort of recommendations to product developers and get it out. High level, Giuseppe is very modular. I think people think that it's a system where you just ask exactly what you want. It gives you the formulation, shelf life, everything is all said and done. That is not the case. What we figured out how to do is make an AI system that allows an R&D team to essentially be turbocharged to make better decisions about the products that they want to create. And like I said, over the last 7 years, it's evolved, but you know, more than I could have ever imagined in terms of what it can do and how it actually gets those jobs done.
A well recognized problem in AI is the cold start problem, just getting enough data to make it effectively smart enough to do something. How did you guys tackle that at the beginning? How did you gather all this data around all these different subcomponents of food to ultimately come up with that first recipe for not milk?
Yeah. So, I mean, almost similar to formulation design, when you're trying to create an AI or a technology, it's an iterative process. So in the early days, when we had no money, we literally scraped the USDA website. And if you go to the USDA website, there's a bunch of free data materials there for you to actually use. And I guess no one had actually joined together to create a comprehensive data set. So you could actually get a nice data set of different ingredients from the plant-based world, different food CPG products, and look at them from a 63-dimensional array of macronutrients, micronutrients, even some functionality of different products. So the first versions of Giuseppe was built on that, and we were able to create products just based on that initial scraping of the USDA website. It was really untapped and unexplored. I don't think anyone had ever put two thoughts of using this data to make a CPG product, and it was right there for the taking. So that's how we started Giuseppe. And then as we started to expand and grow and raise capital investment, we started placing analytical labs. So we have two headquarters, one in San Francisco in the Mission, a beautiful 25,000 square foot facility where we have an analytics team, a pilot plant, et cetera, and one in Santiago, Chile, similar capacity, where we have machinery, we have GCMS, we have FTIR, we have rheology, TPA. We're taking a bunch of different measurements of ingredients, combinations of ingredients, oils and extracts, botanicals, and we're also plugging into an LCMS as we start moving into sort of the world of nutraceuticals and understanding the world of metabolites a bit better in plant materials. So it started with the USDA free data. We were able to prove on that, and then we were able to start looking into very proprietary data sets that we're collecting ourselves.
That's a huge leap forward from like scraping the internet to like these two labs and really breaking down through lab tests, et cetera. And probably lots of expensive equipment to get all that information that feeds into the data set.
Yeah, and not just the capex required for the investment. It's also the way of working. Sometimes we're just collecting data for the sake of collecting data, and I think to some analytical scientists, they're like, "What are we doing with this?" And we're like, "We don't know until we gather enough of it, and then we'll figure it out." And that sort of mindset of being, AI first or data first to kind of figure out what you can learn from a comprehensive data set. I think was novel to the way that we operate as well. So that's helped resonate some breakthroughs as well, especially when we start thinking about the world of nutraceuticals, which maybe is a different podcast that we've been doing some work on as well.
So talk about, those early days coming up with NotCo versus now, like how much faster it goes and like how much more multidimensional the data set is to come up with new formulas. I would imagine you could create things on the fly or a lot more kind of different dynamics or inputs, say, or I imagine it's a world different than what you had before because your
Yeah.
data's grown so much.
Yeah. So yeah, we've definitely developed a lot of technology inside of NotCo for a CPG. So when you think about how a CPG works, most of the time we're looking at the food matrix from the R&D side. We're looking at the texture, the functionality, the cost, the margins of this thing. And then you also have to work across the supply chain because you have ingredient vendors, you have suppliers, and you have flavor houses as well that actually add a lot to the product. So what we decided to do as we made Giuseppe was, okay, what's the technology that we need inside NotCo to be able to get to a high functioning or a high foaming milk product versus what technology might we need to start building out with some of our flavor partners to help them create better flavors for our own products. And so when you think about data, especially in the supply chain of food, it's so fragmented. CPGs will have some data, your suppliers will have some data. I think Cornell University has this huge data set on shelf life that nobody else has for some reason. So the data is just all over the place. And I think what we've done with Giuseppe is figure out a way to incentivize this very fragmented ecosystems of vendors, suppliers, consumer, and universities and researchers to have a system that really operates across data sets in the supply chain for the end goal of launching a consumer product that people will actually want to buy. That hopefully makes an impact on sustainability by having that in the marketplace. So, it's not just a data problem. It's not just an AI problem. It's how do you really corral the supply chain
Yeah.
together under a common sort of goal of getting that product out. Once you get the product out, you're going to start seeing value back upstream the supply chain. So it's a win-win to everybody. And that's kind of how we started designing our AI across the last 2 years or so.
That's super fascinating. I hadn't really thought about, okay, you need to actually design your AI to work with a very complex food development supply chain, flavor houses, ingredient suppliers, product developers, manufacturers. That's super fascinating. And that you spent the last 2 years focusing on that and the complexity of that.
Yeah, I mean, we realized that if we just made an AI system that's just specific to CPG, we're losing out because we're not going to be able to capture all the innovation that's coming upstream in the supply chain, and therefore our downstream products are not going to be superior. And ultimately, that's what we care about. So when you start thinking about strategy and AI, which is once again where I spent the last 2 years really focusing on where to build and how to build with partners, we really identified that the need for NotCo was to tap into our supplier ecosystem and put together not just AI and data, but like economic interests with our partners to be like, how is this going to work? How are we going to bring some of these new capabilities to market? And what does it mean for you? What does it mean for NotCo? What does it mean to perhaps a shared customer that we have? In NotCo, we also have a different business unit called NotCo B2B that's different than our CPG business, where we're actually formulating some of the hardest problems in Nutri-Score, HFSS, sugar, sodium, salt, fat reduction using Giuseppe, but for a shared customer that may be in the EU. That's a huge iconic brands. So how can we create value across the entire ecosystem with AI? Once you start thinking about AI from that perspective, it's really easy to kind of figure out who needs to do what and how in order to kind of make that vision come to fruition.
I know you have that announced JV with Kraft Heinz. So is the B2B side where you're working with third-party customers that may not necessarily be like a JV or announced, but they want to take advantage of some of the power you guys have with Giuseppe?
Yeah, exactly. So ever since our announcement with Kraft Heinz and signing a joint venture, there's been a lot of inbound interest from a lot of other large CPGs of what can you do for us? What is Giuseppe? They want to see it. And I think the funniest thing is when people come, especially R&D folks, they always come very skeptical about Giuseppe, but we've been making Giuseppe with NotCo R&D people that we've poached from all over the industry. And so they see it and they're like, it makes so much sense what you guys are trying to do. It makes sense how you guys are able to bootstrap new machine learning models on new categories with very limited amounts of data sets. Like the way you guys have thought about AI and how we can actually drive impact is very different than what we see perhaps a third party technology vendor who's just a pure SaaS company try to sell us technology. So Yeah, to answer your question, we've been fielding a lot of interest, and we have deals now that I can't speak to with very, very large global CPGs, very large global brands that are using Giuseppe in different capacities to help optimize different functionalities or elements of their products. And this can range from anywhere between end-to-end innovation, where we can help be an innovation partner house, innovation partner to all these companies, and launch completely new innovations that we've de-risked using our AI, all the way to renovation. Hey, you have a product that is, you're going to lose 20% of your consumers because you're going to have to go through these Nutri-Score HFSS regulations in UK and Europe. You need to really quickly move to reformulate that product. And Giuseppe, with its sort of constraints, optimization capabilities, can help you get to really good nutritionals while keeping the taste, texture, flavor, and the indulgence that consumers love. And we've been able to prove that out. It hasn't just been lip service. We went through some really intensive months of a large CPG saying, all right, go fix this with Giuseppe, and we're going to watch you do it. And literally 3 months, they're there. They have their R&D team on site in San Francisco watching our developers. And it's just kind of miraculous that,
Yeah.
we stress test the system to this level and something really great comes out. And I think that's when the aha moment happens. That's when you start saying like, okay, there's economic interest here because this product we know needs to live in the marketplace. And so then it gives us a lot more viability to expand our AI to upstream vendors in order to kind of close the gaps on flavor, on ingredient quality, on yield, on replacing cocoa, for example, which is a huge problem today in some of these industries. So it's been interesting to see how we've been able to turn NotCo from just a pure CPG company, where really Giuseppe was a proof of concept of, hey, can you launch CPG products with AI first? And we've been able to show that very successfully, especially through our Latin American markets, to now can Giuseppe be used in the service for other companies, to create the impact that we want to see around health, nutrition, sustainability, all of the above.
So can you talk a little bit about how you're thinking about generative AI? Because I know a lot of the folks who have been working on, using AI to rethink novel inputs, et cetera, aren't necessarily using generative AI. But are you thinking about that and how you can use it at NotCo?
Yeah, so my background's in AI and not foods. I've only known about food for 5 years. The reason I joined NotCo was I thought before the whole Chat GPT revolution that generative AI was going to be huge, and I think I'm right about that now in 2024. Everyone knows what that is, but back then I was just researching generative AI, and I thought that hey, this food formulation problem could be a really good sort of real world example of where generative AI could be used to develop new and novel things. So we've been using generative AI inside NotCo since the inception, right? We have patents on it too, about being able to essentially prompt what you want, and the system being able to generate different formulation design from different aspects. So the pineapple and cabbage I was talking about earlier, the peach and the tomato, that all came from our generative AI system. So what we're thinking about with generative AI is not just how generative AI is used to create formulations and recipes, both on the CPG side and on the flavor side with their partners. But really, how do you work with a formulator to surface up generative AI ideas and then be able to actually produce something? So there's this whole middle step that I think people are missing today, which is, with the generative AI system, you can prompt it whatever you want. Like think about ChatGPT, you can get an infinite amount of answers. You can just prompt it the same thing over and over and over again, and it will just give you, 1,000, 2,000 different responses. So the question that we have, especially as you start moving into food formulation rather than just like text, video, image generation, is discernment. I have 10,000 ideas that came out of my concept generator that we have at NotCo, or formula generator that we have at NotCo, or our flavor generator and fragrance generator that we have at our supplier. How can we go from a world of 10,000 potential formulations or ideas or whatever, and have good discernment of these are the ones that are most likely to work in a lab setting, a pilot setting, or beyond. So I think this intermediate layer of discernment is what we're highly focused on, because we've already established generative AI in concepts, we've established it in food formulation, and now we've established it in flavor and fragrance as well. And we're seeing really, really big advances on this discernment front.
It's so interesting because I think it was Bloomberg or someone just did a big article on how they put a bunch of this stuff to the test, and the others who are using large language models to make recipes, and It was that discernment problem that was a problem. Like you get some really bad results. And I think LLMs have gotten better. What's the secret to building an AI that can really discern, okay, this is going to be, as I think in the article, a big glob of gray goo versus something that's actually really tasty food or a really great novel input?
Yeah. Today, how we solve it is something that we call controllability in our generative AI system. So um, we launched a new generative AI system with one of our flavor and fragrance house partners, where uh, they had tried using ChatGPT to design a flavor and a fragrance formulation, and it failed miserably because ChatGPT doesn't have access to this core formulation IP that's locked away inside flavor houses, that's locked away inside CPG companies. ChatGPT only looks at open internet stuff. So what we said is, hey, we have this idea for this new sort of foundational model that tokenizes on volatile molecules instead of words. But other than that, it's very similar to how these GPT and generative models work. They use transformer networks. We use attention layers along the way. Can we test out us coming in and you giving us your formulation data and us being able to create a new foundational model on flavor and fragrance formulation? And long story short, we aligned the economic interests of everybody. They said yes. We deployed our AI, and within 3 months, we had trained it. And what we decided to do was say, okay, we're going to be doing a bunch of A/B validation tests with the generative AI system versus human perfumists. And so we in order to validate that our AI was working, we had a brief. So it's a natural language brief of, hey, we want to design this perfume. It's for a beachy summer sort of floral kind of attributes and notes. I'm not a perfumist, so I don't know all their vocabulary, but they had this whole prompt that they input into the system. They gave that same sort of prompt to their perfumist, and they both ended up designing, across 13 different prompts, 13 different perfumes. And then we did an A/B test from other perfumists to say, hey, which one do you think came from the generative AI system, the actual formulation? They compounded it. Which one do you think came from the human perfumist? Long story short, it was a 50-50. You could not discern whether this actual formulation, this product that you're seeing in front of you, came from a human or a generative AI system. And it was so funny because everyone was so skeptical going in, even me. I was like, I don't know if this is going to work to actually go one shot fragrance generation using a generative AI system. And it worked beyond our wildest beliefs. And what ended up happening, we thought the perfumist would get kind of annoyed or ticked off. It's like, hey, this thing's going to replace my job. And actually the opposite happened. They said, this is so good. I would love to use this to augment my job because I can now take on like 10x more briefs with this system. But what I'd like the AI to do is be able to have this element of controllability. So coming back to your question, what I'd like to do is there's some things I know that the AI is coming up with that I know from my domain, it doesn't make sense. So what I'm going to do, would it be possible for us to go in there, look at this portion of the formulation, maybe just the mid notes, and say, hey, I want to completely change that out. Here's what I'm thinking just for the mid notes, and have it reformulate just for the centerpiece. And so when we think about discernment can come from different things. It can come from the AI itself, it can come from humans, and it can come from other elements. And so, from that, we've started building that out. And the other area of discernment is the sales and marketing guys at the flavor and perfume house. Hey, if we hooked up this model now to our sales data, could we now start predicting what new flavors or fragrances could respond to consumers? Because now maybe there's a way to identify white space, look in our sales data. So to me, this is another element of discernment. What is actually going to have purchase intent? What's going to drive likability? Right. So when you're thinking about the foundational model, it's not just, hey, we have a generative AI system that takes a brief and outputs a flavor or formula. Let's figure out what are the input levels of discernment, whether that's coming from a human, a domain expert, a perfumist that has 30 years of experience, or if it's coming from the sales team saying, hey, this is what's actually performing the best. These are the perfumes that I know that are working the best with my customers. Can we generate based on this input? And so it's how do we discern, how do we contextualize on things that we know are going to move the needle? And so that's what we started building out. And I think that has given us a lot more flexibility in not just making this technology something that happens in a laboratory and never sees the light of day, but what we're really moving to is this is going to turn into partnerships where other CPGs, non-food CPGs looking at laundry detergent, soap, or whatever can come in and work much more frictionlessly with the
Yeah.
flavor and fragrance house to kind of create that product that they know is gonna jive with the consumers, both from an experience perspective and a purchase intent, consumer liking perspective as well. So long answer to your short
Yeah.
question, but there's a lot of context there with discernment.
Is this the first time that you've actually worked that far up the funnel where you've asked sales guys to say, hey, can we use this model to see if we can maybe see if we can react faster to what maybe a flavor trend on the marketplace?
Um, with a partner, yeah, because most, within NotCo, we're always thinking about the longevity of AI. Once again, we don't want to create AI that's just siloed off and siphoned off in a data science MacBook somewhere and it gets lost. It's like, how do we make this a reality? How do we actually transform the way that CPGs operate end to end? So within NotCo, we're always talking to our sales and marketing people. We actually ended up designing a whole new concept generation system, more than just doing social listening with our innovation team inside NotCo. And we were able to put together a whole program inside NotCo called Giuseppe Bytes, where we're actually testing out purchase intent of concepts generated by the AI. And the sales and marketing people are like, this is great. Like what we were selling this stuff out to marketing agencies and we were getting just trash back, no offense to the marketing agencies, in terms of concepts. Here we actually have proof of value, going from AI to products to measuring purchase intent, and you can start tracking it across the formulation space as well. So we've been talking a lot to our sales and marketing team inside NotCo, and then with this flavor fragrance stuff, the only way to get in the door, honestly, with these guys was to talk to their top level folks, right? Their CEO. Why are you guys deploying this AI? What is this generative AI? What is it going to do for me? So we think about what AI can do from, once again, an economic perspective, from a value creation perspective, before we even go build it. Otherwise, if you don't have all these stakeholders aligned, then you're not. Then it's just a bunch of nothing. There's going to be no ROI on this really cool, crazy AI that we want to deploy into the fragmented ecosystem of CPG food.
So you came from outside of food and beverage to eventually come into NotCo. You're an AI guy before that. How do you think the current state of food and beverage is with regards to adopting AI? Because it seems like to me, 12 months ago versus today, we've seen a massive leap forward in terms of the belief in it. But I'm just kind of curious how you're seeing these big brands adopt it.
Very, very. I think it's very poor. I think there's a lot
Oh,
of
okay.
intent.
Okay.
I would say there's strong intent to adopt it, but I think there hasn't really been put forth like a concrete action plan to actually develop the first AI enabled R&D workforce. One of the reasons that we have a lot of these CPG brands literally visiting our office and shadowing us for like a week at a time, they'll be in our office for 3 days to a week, and we'll show them how we iterate with the AI, and they can try the products. More than the products themselves, I think a lot of folks and senior executives have been kind of opened their eye to saying, hey, these guys are not just creating AI, they have an AI enabled workforce that can actually develop products using AI seamlessly. And what I love about it is I am no longer the one talking about AI. I have my food scientists talking about AI. I think some are going to be going to your food summit talk. It's like you guys are the ones that developed the technology and created the flavors. Like show how it can be done. And I think that's the difference between where I see a lot of the hype in the media today, which is AI this, AI that, versus NotCo's. We've been trying to build this systematically and prove its value out for the last 7 years. And so now when we start talking to a lot of folks in CPG, I would say CPG hasn't really even moved so far into the world of digital. I've talked to a lot of different CPG companies. Excel is still the number one tool that product development teams use.
Wow.
And to me, there's a huge opportunity there, and we're starting to build new tech there as well, which is, can we empower every formulator at every CPG company to make much better decisions at the point of formulations, right? When we think once again about the fragmented CPG food industry, if you need to figure out if this ingredient is more sustainable than this ingredient, there's no real great way of doing that. If you want to get a price check on something, prices are kind of opaque, and it's hard to get information to formulators. So there is room, I think, for new AI tech for formulators. And I think there is room for sort of best practices and lessons learned of adopting AI. And I know NotCo, our team, is putting together some webinars to showcase this. We did a lunch and learn at a really large CPG company. I think 1,000 of their R&D folks joined, and it was eye opening to them. It's
Wow.
like they
Wow.
understood, yeah, they understood like what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and we're very transparent. Like this worked, this didn't work, because if you're trying to do something brand new, especially with AI, you're gonna be met with a lot of challenges and failures. And I think it's really important for a company like NotCo that's been going through this journey for the last few years, to not just highlight the successes, but also highlight where it failed from an organization perspective, from a people perspective, et cetera. We actually just finished recording 6 episodes of a NotCo specific podcast on Friday. I don't know when they're going to release them, but one of the topics that we talked to with our founders is how do we create, what were the frictions when we were trying to put AI into R&D, and what were the lessons learned? And, I'll send that to you, Mike, when it's out, but I think there was a lot of good learnings there and a lot of good laughs,
Yeah,
but it
for
was
sure.
interesting to be there through the time.
Great. Adit Patel, thank you so much. Been great talking to you. Appreciate your time.
Thanks, Mike.